After a dominant performance at the FIBA U19 World Cup, Texas Tech guard Christian Anderson is shaping up to be one of college basketball's biggest sophomore breakouts.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, folks, and welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, a daily national college hoop show, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host and longtime college basketball podcaster, Andy Patton. You're joining us at the place to get your college basketball content every single day, Monday through Friday, whether we're right in the middle of the season or here in the midst of the off season. I want to thank all of you for making the show your first listen or your first watch of the day, and remind you that you can listen to the show ad-free on Amazon Music. Of course, we got a special shout out for our everyday listeners and those of you who've been hanging out with us in the Locked On College Basketball Discord community. Fun show for you all today. Isaac and I talked about the freshmen or the incoming freshmen who participated in the FIBA U19 tournament. We talked about AJ Dibansa's performance and Mikael Brown's performance, who's heading to Louisville. And today we're going to focus on the sophomores, players who were in this event, whether for Team USA or for other teams, who participated and kind of how they did and what that might mean for their upcoming sophomore season. We're also going to talk about Florida's 7'9" center, Olivier Rioux, and what his limited role with Canada might indicate about his future at the college basketball level, plus a few lesser known returners to the college basketball space who are on some of the other teams in this FIBA event. And then we're going to close out the show talking about some recent 2025 commitments, including a big time addition potentially for Ryan Odom at Virginia. But we start with the biggest performer among the rising sophomores who were in the FIBA U19 World Cup, which was, of course, won by Team USA, as we talked about on Monday's show. But one of the big stars was on the German team, and it was not Hans Steinbeck, although he was fantastic, and he's an incoming freshman for Germany. It was, in fact, Texas Tech guard Christian Anderson. Christian Anderson was very good last year for Texas Tech, but looked absolutely fantastic for this very, very good German club during the U19 World Cup. He averaged 17.3 points per game, 6.6 assists, and 4.9 rebounds. He was one of the best passers in the entire event, top 5 in assists, top 10 in points, one of the top 30 or 40 rebounders as well. Just excellent all around from Anderson. Some of his biggest performances included a 27.6 assist, 5 rebound game against Slovenia, and then an 18.9 assist, 5 rebound, 4 steal performance against Team USA. That was in the championship game. USA pulled away in the second half, but Germany was, I think, just down 3 at halftime. And Team USA, they got challenged a little bit by Canada earlier in the event, but for the most part, Tommy Lloyd's club just ran through this World Cup with ease. And you'd kind of expect that with the team that had, again, Dibansa and Brown and so many other incredibly talented players on that roster. 2026's top prospect, Tyron Stokes, was part of the team. Daniel Jacobson and Morez Johnson, who we'll talk about both of them a little bit later in the show. Really talented club. And they struggled with Germany in a huge part due to what Christian Anderson was able to do. Throughout the event, he shot 35% from 3. That was on 18 of 51 shooting. A really strong performance for a player who is going to step into a bigger role next year for this Texas Tech club. We already know that. And it's not like he was a bit player last year for Grant McCaslin's team. He averaged 10.5 points per game as a true freshman, also 3 rebounds and 2.2 assists. But that was on a team that had Elijah Hawkins starting at the 1. That team that had Kevin Overton playing a big role as a guard. Both those guys are gone. Overton's hit the transfer portal, and Elijah Hawkins is out of eligibility, so he moves on. And so now you have an opportunity for Anderson to step into the starting point guard role. And based on how he facilitated the basketball for this Germany club, I think you got to feel pretty good about it. It's hard to replace Elijah Hawkins. He's an incredibly gifted passer, a guy who averaged over, I think he was second or third in the country in assists per game, not last year at Tech, but prior to that when he was at Minnesota, an incredibly gifted passer. And now you got to replicate that kind of production in a backcourt that's going to be a pretty new look team or new look group for McCaslin's club and the Red Raiders. But you got to feel really good about what Christian Anderson did if you're a Red Raiders fan. I know I do. I think this is going to be a fantastic, easy to predict sophomore breakout year. And again, it depends on your definition of breakout. I think a lot of people will quibble at a player who already averaged in double figures as a freshman being a breakout candidate as a sophomore. And that's fair. I think it's reasonable to have a threshold that's not was a double-digit scorer as a freshman for breakout candidates. But I think you're going to see an Anderson who looks even better and puts up even bigger numbers on a Texas Tech team that, of course, returns JT Toppin and has so much talent already on the roster. They bring in a couple of transfers from the WCC that I really like. LaJuan Watts comes in from Washington State. He's going to be excellent. Really good fit for the style of play that Coach McCaslin has on this Red Raiders team. They also bring in Tyree Bryan, who's a gifted three-point shooter from Santa Clara. Bryan's the guy who dropped 35 points on Gonzaga at the Kennel. Not a lot of people do that. Santa Clara is the only team in the history of the McCarthy Athletic Center to score 100 points in a true road game against Gonzaga, and Tyree Bryan had 35 of them. He's a great player. So you surround this team with a dominant low post scorer in Toppin, some great three-point shooters coming in as well, and now Anderson's going to be the straw that stirs the drink. Again, hard to not feel real good about this if you are a Red Raiders fan. Isaac and I did talk a little bit about Morez Johnson Jr., so I won't spend as long talking about him, but he was great for Team USA, one of the handful of returners or of players who were already in college basketball who were on this Team USA team. Morez Johnson was at Illinois last year and transferred to Michigan this offseason. For Team USA, he averaged 9.5 points, 6.5 boards, just under 2 blocks per game. He was great in that championship game against Anderson in Germany. He had 15 points, 10 boards on shot 5 of 6 from the field. Last year for Illinois, he averaged 7 points, about 7 boards, just over a block per game. But he's a monstrous get for Michigan and Coach Dusty May in the transfer portal. He's projected to start at center for the Wolverines. Tough shoes to fill as well. We talked about Anderson having to replace Hawkins. Morez Johnson's got to replace Danny Wolf and Vlad Golden for Dusty May. I think he's more than ready to do that, assuming health for him. If we talk about Anderson being a breakout candidate, having averaged just over 10 points per game, I guess we can count Morez Johnson for being a little under 10 points per game, or at 7 points per game, I should say, for Illinois last year. I think he's going to be one of the best players on this Michigan team, arguably one of the best players in the Big Ten. I wouldn't be surprised if both Anderson and Morez Johnson are all conference players in the Big 12 and Big 10, respectively. It's a little bit more bold to predict that our third player here is going to be an all-conference player, although it could happen. I'm not quite sure I'm ready to hang my hat on predicting Julius Halifanoa for Georgetown being that level of sophomore breakout, but we only played 6 games last year at Georgetown. He was injured, just didn't get to be that level of player. There was people who had him on deep mock drafts for 2025 as a potential one-and-done candidate. I don't think he looked like that caliber of player, even in the 6 games that he played. He only played 13 minutes a game and averaged just 3 points, but it wouldn't stun me if he breaks out for the Hoyas and Coach Ed Cooley in his second year. He played for New Zealand in this U19 event, averaged 10.5 points, 5.5 boards, 1.6 blocks per game, had 15 points, 4 boards, and 2 blocks against Team USA, and he looked great in that game. He was active. He was active defensively. He was crashing the glass well. He scored well. He's an efficient scorer around the rim. The three-point shot is inconsistent, but he's capable of being a three-point shooter. And I think Georgetown is going to let him take the opportunities to try to be that player. He also had a great game against Slovenia, 16 points, 5 blocks, 5 boards, and 4 assists. He's kind of a connecting big who you can kind of operate the offense out of in the high post, similar to the way that Domantas Sabonis is used in the NBA, or perhaps Nikola Jokic, if you want to go with that example. And I think he's somebody who can be that role. Be interesting to see if Georgetown used him that way, but there's obviously playing time to be had in the front court for the Hoyas after Thomas Sorber goes to the NBA as a lottery pick after a great freshman year last year for this team. We got some other bigs we're going to talk about. Instead of Morez Johnson, instead of Julius Halifanoa, we're going to talk about 7'9" center Olivier Rioux, who is a TikTok sensation. He's all over the news. People love to talk about him because he is 7'9". But did his performance at the FIBA U19 World Cup increase or decrease the odds of him someday contributing for Todd Golden, the Florida Gators? We're going to talk about that in just a second. But first, folks, have you ever decided at the last minute, I want to go to the ball game? I don't want to watch it on TV. I want to get out there. It's sunny. It's nice. I want to see some baseball played in the sun. Maybe it's time for you to get out there. That's exactly where Gametime comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without all the stress and hassle. And with the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, even invite a bigger group to come with you. Gametime makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app, they actually drop the closer it gets to first pitch, and they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear views from your seat, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. Gametime is also the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB, making it easier to browse the app for an exciting upcoming game, and that includes the All-Star Game, which is in Atlanta next Tuesday. Gametime has tickets for the All-Star Game under $300, and that includes fees, and they have some great deals where you can be down on the first base line with incredible views for just over $600. Folks, take the guesswork out of buying tickets by using Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Terms apply. Download the Gametime app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On College Basketball Podcast, and we're still talking about the sophomores, rising sophomores who participated in the FIBA U19 World Cup, which was finalized on Sunday as Team USA took down Team Germany with a strong second half to bring home a gold medal for Coach Tommy Lloyd, as well as the superstars on that team, AJ Dibansa, Koa Pete, Mikal Brown, etc., etc. One of the guys taking home a gold medal is Daniel Jacobson. Daniel Jacobson, 7'3" center from Purdue. Jacobson only played 2 games last year. He's kind of similar to Halafanoa as like a big man who was expected to have a big role as a freshman right away, but unfortunately suffered an injury. Jacobson, again, only 2 games, but played well for Team USA. Wasn't a huge contributor for them necessarily. They have a ton of talent on this roster, but the numbers for him were still very solid. 6.5 points per game, a little over 4 rebounds per game, just under 2 blocks per game, was one of the best shot blockers in the entire event. He had a great game against Jordan, 15 points, 5 boards, and 5 blocks in that one. And again, it's Purdue. Of course, they have a 7'3" center on the roster. This is the kind of player that they pursue. This is the kind of thing that Matt Painter loves. And again, while we didn't see much of him last year, the nice thing for Purdue is that they're kind of easing him back into action this year. There's a lot of upside here. We've seen his fluidity. We've seen the shot blocking. We've seen, obviously, just the size and impact that he can have. Is he going to be the next Zach Edey? No, probably not. I mean, I don't think that's in anywhere close to a fair thing to try to put on anybody, because Zach Edey was a 2-time National Player of the Year. He's one of the best college basketball players of the last 25 years. Very few players are going to reach that threshold. But can Jacobson be a significantly impact player for Purdue as soon as this year? Absolutely. And like we said, the good news, Purdue doesn't need him to be a guy playing 25, 28 minutes per game. They don't even need him to play 15 minutes a game necessarily. I think you're looking at a starting lineup that includes Oscar Clough and Trey Kaufman-Renn for this Purdue team, as well as, of course, Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer and CJ Cox. That's the projected starting 5. Trey Kaufman-Renn's going to soak up a huge amount of minutes in that front court. He's going to be a dynamic scorer for them, all Big Ten caliber player, potential All-American candidate for Purdue. Certainly Braden Smith is your preseason favorite for player of the year in all of college basketball, at least one of the favorites for that. Fletcher Lawyer, obviously a fantastic player, and is going to step into an even bigger role for this team next year. Clough's a tremendous player they added in the transfer portal. So there is plenty of talent on this roster for Jacobson to not need to be a big-time contributor. But his size, his experience, even just being on the bench last year, learning about this team, kind of getting used to the day-to-day operations. I doubt he traveled much with the team, but getting used to, the game day routine, what it's like in the arena, all that stuff, it helps. It helps these players be more prepared, even if they don't get a lot of minutes on the floor in their freshman year, and then getting a chance to compete on a FIBA team, compete for another coach in Tommy Lloyd to see things done a little differently, to compete with really high-level players like Morez Johnson, who's going to be in the Big Ten next year. Like, this is all good stuff for Daniel Jacobson, and I think he's primed to be a big-time player for Purdue, likely off the bench in a more limited role. But if he's capable of being like a starting caliber center, and Purdue has him as their third big, look out, because the Boilermakers are already projected number one in a lot of people's preseason rankings, and his performance and the performance of Amir Mayer from Israel, who is an incoming freshman for this team, who looked great in the FIBA tournament. Those two guys looking pretty good. All the more reason to have Purdue at or near the top of your preseason rankings. Want to also talk about another big man. We talked about Jacobson's 7'3" frame. He wasn't even close to the biggest player in this event. That would be Olivier Rioux, who was at Florida last year as a redshirt freshman. And he made a lot of headlines. And it's funny because Florida's front court made a lot of headlines as well. Obviously, you had that combination of Ruben Chinyelu and Thomas Houck and Alex Condon and Micah Handlockton. They significantly contributed to this team winning a national championship. Walter Clayton got a lot of the overall headlines for that team, justifiably so, but those four bigs were a huge part of it. And now every single one of those bigs is back for Florida. So what does that mean for Olivier Rioux? Well, it means another year probably looking pretty similar to last year. He's not going to redshirt 2 years in a row, but I can't imagine that he's anywhere close to a significant contributor for this team. And that's not really an insult to him, and more so like, look at the front court that this team has. Most are projecting that Florida will start 3 of the 4 bigs, with Thomas Houck playing the 3, Condon playing the 4, and Chinyelu playing the 5. That still has 7-footer Micah Handlockton coming off the bench. But if they are playing Houck more at the 3, that does open up a potential for there to be some more playing time for you in a bench role coming off and kind of filling into the center and either sliding Chinyelu down or just, being able to replace Handlockton, kind of as that backup 5. So here's the thing, though. Rioux, Team Canada was good. They had some significant talent on that roster. A lot of guys who are going to play college basketball next year, some who played last year as well. But Rioux didn't do much for Team Canada in the U19 World Cup. He only played 9 minutes per game. He averaged less than 2 points, just 2 rebounds, 0.6 blocks per game. He's just not somebody who has enough stamina to stay on the floor. And while he moves decently well, it's just really hard to move consistently at that size. I mean, there's a reason that players like Victor Wembanyama are so unbelievably rare, because anytime you get over 7'4", 7'3", 7'4", you just there's the mechanisms to move your body consistently are just so much more difficult, and staying healthy is so hard. I mean, it's just there are not a lot of players who have been incredibly impactful above 7'5", 7'6", and the ones who aren't really playing as much in the modern NBA because they were just huge players, like Jorge Mirzan or Manute Bol, who played in the 90s where they could kind of just play around the rim. And those guys were good NBA players, decent shot blockers, but they weren't great because they just had a hard time being mobile enough and being big enough and strong enough. Because if you want to put on weight and be muscular at that size, you're going to weigh 280, 290, 300 pounds, and it's just tough to move around. So the fact that Rioux barely saw the floor for a Canada team that probably could have used his size, the fact that he didn't play at Florida, the fact that Florida returned everybody, I think we got to pump the brakes on Rioux being much more than a deep end of the bench guy. If he really ever even sees the floor for Florida, there's a chance he plays very, very little this upcoming season. I just don't see a lot of room for him. But he's a fun player to watch, fun player to keep track of. 7'9" doesn't come around very often. So certainly I'd like to see him succeed. I think it'd be very fun if he was somebody who could end up being an impactful player. Even just like a 8 to 10 minute per game guy off the bench would be fun to see. In the SEC, you're a good player. If you can play 8 minutes per game in the SEC, that is not easy to do. And we haven't really seen Rioux prove that he's ready for that kind of role. But I'm going to be keeping an eye on what he looks like this year for this Florida team. Very quickly, I got a trio of international players who were in the FIBA World Cup who have transferred this offseason, all mid-major guys. But some guys who put up some big numbers in this event. Really one guy who put up big numbers in this event, I should say. That was Dayon Nessa. Nessa is transferring from George Washington to Cleveland State. And Cleveland State, they got to feel pretty darn good about what he did in this event for Switzerland. Averaged just under 18 points, was one of the top 10 leading scorers, 9.3 rebounds. I think he was 3rd or 4th in total rebounds, 3.4 assists per game as well. A dynamic player who shot the absolute crap out of the basketball in this event. 14 of 27 for 3, 52% from long distance. He had some monster performances, 25 points, 8 boards, and a pair of steals against Israel, 22 points, 15 boards, and 5 assists versus France in a 43-minute overtime game. Last year, he only played about 7 minutes per game in 21 games for George Washington in the A10. However, even in a very limited role for George Washington, Nessa did shoot 52% from three. So he was a 52% three-point shooter in the A10. He was a 52% three-point shooter in the FIBA U19 World Cup. And now he goes to Cleveland State. That's a good deal for them. They got somebody who can space the floor, who's going to be an absolute menace out on the perimeter. This is a good deal for this Cleveland State club. Two other guys here. Joel Karam played for Israel in this event, averaged about 9 minutes per game, but just 2 points, 3 rebounds. So wasn't a big, super impactful player for a team that, frankly, wasn't all that good. Again, Omir Mayer was great for Israel. The player's going to Purdue next year, but nobody else looked all that great. Karam was at Utah last year in the Big 12, only played 8 games and 29 total minutes, though. Hit the transfer portal, stayed in the state of Utah, but is going to Utah Valley, the Wolverines in the Western Athletic Conference, the final year of the WAC. We'll see if Karam can kind of rebuild some value and have a nice season for Utah Valley, but the fact that he struggled to get on the floor for Israel is probably not a great sign for him going forward. Last but not least, Keenan Gardner transferring to Central Michigan from IU Indy. Last year, he averaged about 5.3 points and 5 boards for IU Indy. He actually put up very similar numbers in 11 minutes per game for Germany in this event. Gardner averaged 5 points and 4.3 rebounds for the German club. Again, the German club was pretty darn good with Anderson and Steinbach, so to carve out a role and play well in that role is a good sign for him and a good sign for the Chippewas of Central Michigan to have him coming onto campus for this upcoming season. Well, folks, it's been a show full of international flavor, so we're going to continue that here. Ryan Odom landed a 22-year-old Belgium forward who, if he's eligible, could be a game changer for Virginia. But that's if he's eligible. We'll talk more about that in just a second. All right, folks, closing out the show, continuing our conversation about international players in the college basketball space. We talked about the FIBA World Cup. We talked about some of the returners for college basketball, including Christian Anderson at Texas Tech, Morez Johnson Jr. at Michigan, Julius Halafanoa for Georgetown. We talked about Olivier Rioux from Florida and his performance for Team Canada, Daniel Jacobson for Purdue. And now, instead of talking about FIBA, we're going to move on and talk about some recent signings, some recent additions for 3 power conference programs out of the international market and out of just the regular high school recruiting. Some players that we think are going to make an impact next year. We start for Virginia, Ryan Odom and the Who's bringing in a 6'8" forward, Thies de Reader. He's coming over from Spain. He's a Belgian forward, again at 6'8". He's also 22 years old. And there is currently a waiver pending, according to John Rothstein, for eligibility. So at this point, De Reader is not a sure thing. He's not a guaranteed player to be contributing for Virginia next year. He needs a waiver for NCAA eligibility. Again, he's 22 years old. He went through the draft process recently. The first video, if you look up his name on YouTube, is a video of him after a workout with the Indiana Pacers before the 2024 NBA draft. Not a lot of players who are working out with NBA teams are signing to play college basketball a full year later. So it makes sense that the NCAA is looking into this. However, he's not the only 20-plus-year-old quote-unquote freshman who could be coming over to college basketball for the first time. Luka Bogovac is a recent example who signed with North Carolina. For the record, I don't think De Reader he wouldn't be a freshman. He wouldn't get 4 years of eligibility, but he's hoping to get 1 year of eligibility to play at Virginia and kind of boost his draft stock. Last year, he played for Cernay Bilbao Basket in Spain, averaged 9.5 points per game on 38% shooting from 3. He joins a crowded but very new-look front court for Virginia that includes a fellow international big man in Johan Grunlow from Germany. It also includes Irvine transfer Devin Tillis and Kansas State transfer Ugana Onyenso. They return Carter Lang. They add a freshman in Silas Barksdale, so it's going to be a very new-look group for Virginia up front, but they're also going to have a really great backcourt as well. Malik Thomas transferring in from San Francisco, Dallin Hall from BYU, also had some mid-major transfers, Jakari Lane and Sam Lewis, Chance Mallory, a 4-star guard coming in. It's going to be a fun season for Ryan Odom and Virginia. I'm excited about this group. I've been talking about them quite a bit on the show. And now, if De Reader gets that eligibility, having a 6'8" floor spacing kind of 3-4 hybrid is just who has this level of experience, who's played professionally overseas, again, who's already been considered an NBA draft prospect, working out with teams. I don't think you can make a better addition in early July than that. So we'll see if this pans out for Odom and Virginia. But man, they're going to be rising up the ranks in the ACC if he's able to play for them next year. Speaking of teams rising up the ACC ranks, Miami bringing in a 6'6" freshman for next year in Trayvon Maddox. Maddox was just outside the top 100 of the 2025 class at Rivals. He's considered a 4-star recruit. He actually committed to Stephen F. Austin fairly early in the recruiting process, but decommitted back in February as his stock kind of continued to rise. And he thought, hey, maybe there's an opportunity for me to go somewhere else. That ends up being the case as he goes to Miami, joins Jay Lucas's brand new club. Maddox is a super athlete. He plays above the rim, big time dunker, raises hell out in transition, needs to work on his ball handling skills, been working on his passing, but player, because of his length, because of his athleticism, projects to be a good defender at the next level and could be a really great fit for what we expect Jay Lucas's team to do for the Canes, even though we have not seen him yet as a head coach. 6th edition for Miami out of the freshman class. That also includes 2 4-star guys in Shelton Henderson and Dante Allen, who are ranked 25th and 35th in the class at 247 Sports. That includes point guard John LeBoy, a 3-star prospect, and a pair of internationals in Timoyej Malovich and Salih Altuntas. And then, of course, 6 transfers coming in. That's Malik Renault, Trey Donaldson, Ernest Uday, True Washington, Jordan Key, and Marcus Allen. Just an incredible group of talent joining this team. I think you got 5 starting transfers for this team. That would be Renault, Donaldson, Uday, Washington, 4 starting transfers, and then Shelton Henderson is going to be your 5th starter for this team. Very excited to see what Coach Lucas and the Canes can do after a really disappointing season last year, the final half year really under Jim Larrañaga before he retired just after Christmas. Final addition here, Ben McCollum. Speaking of new coaches, all 3 of these new coaches making new additions here as McCollum for Iowa brings in a 4-star forward in Trey Thompson, first ranked recruit in the Ben McCollum era since joining Iowa earlier in the offseason after a phenomenal first season at the D1 level coaching the Drake Bulldogs. We've seen Iowa add Trevin Jurak and Tate Sage, but they're both unranked recruits. Thompson is 91st in the 2025 class at 247 Sports. He's a 6'8" 4-star forward. He actually picked Iowa over Clemson, Purdue, Vanderbilt, and Tennessee. So a lot of competition. He visited all 4 of those schools. So for this, for Thompson to land at Iowa after looking at some really big time programs is a great sign of things to come for Coach McCollum and the Hawkeyes. Obviously, this is a transfer heavy group. A lot of players joining, following Coach McCollum from Drake to Iowa, but they also bring in Brendan Howson from Kansas State. The most notable addition, though, of course, is Bennett Sturtz. Sturtz was an All-American for for Drake last year. Prolific scorer, prolific shooter, potential NBA draft candidate before he chose to return to college and go to Iowa to follow his coach. I'm really excited to see what he can do in the Big Ten. It's going to be a lot of fun. Bringing in a 4-star, 6'8" forward in Trey Thompson, certainly not going to hurt for the Hawkeyes as they look to kind of pull themselves up in the Big Ten and as they kind of move away from the Fran McCaffrey era, which had some good things and some bad things during his very lengthy tenure with the Hawkeyes. It's going to wrap it up for me today here on the Locked On College Basketball Podcast. Thank you so much for making this show your first listen or your first watch of the day. Isaac will be back with you all with a fun guest on Wednesday's show, and then it'll be him and Leaf for Thursday. And then he and I will be back together on Friday, hopefully doing some fun stuff for you here as we close out the week. Thanks again, folks. Have a fantastic rest of your day. As always, we want to say apologies to the Lawyer family, even though we gave you some love today for Purdue. Let's go Wild Popes. Cheers to the McBruins. And until next time, peace out.